Order, please. We will resume debate on Bill 42. The Honourable Minister of Labrador and Aboriginal Affairs.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and bear with me. As you can tell, I had a little trouble with the voice here tonight. Mr. Speaker, as I always do in this honourable House, it's a pleasure and an honour to be here and to get up and speak once again here tonight on Bill 42. As I always do when I stand in my place, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to give thanks to the great people of the District of Lake Melville, through Churchill Falls, through Goose Bay, through Shahadji, through Northwest River, through Mud Lake. Time and time again, Mr. Speaker, the people come out to support me. I'm there to liaise with them. They're always there to have my back, and they know that I have an open door when they can always reach me. To them, I honestly say thank you so very much for your continued support, Mr. Speaker. We're here tonight to speak about Bill 42, of course, and an act to amend the Electoral Boundaries Act, Mr. Speaker, and I, for one, and we've heard this on this side of the House, we've had acknowledgement from the other side as well, Mr. Speaker, that we can get this done within a time period that allows us to have our election in 2015. I stand by that. That's what we want. That's what I want. That's what everybody in this House wants. That's what the province wants, Mr. Speaker, and we can make that happen. We have consensus in this House about the idea of parliamentary reform, the idea of bringing down the number of seats across the public of this great province, from Labrador, right from the tip of Labrador, from Maine, right down to the Avalon. We have consensus among the people as well, not only inside this House but outside as well, that they'd like to see a reduction in the number of seats. We understand, Mr. Speaker, in times such as this of fiscal restraint, we have to be very frugal, we have to be very prudent, and the cost reduction associated with this is evident. When you talk about salaries, support staff, you talk about expenses, you talk about, even in the long term, about people not being included into the pension plan, and pension reform, of course, will be next, Mr. Speaker. It's just being fiscally responsible, and no matter which side of the House you sit on, we can all agree that with circumstances, with the price of oil right now, and our revenue streams of income to this province, we all have to have that mindset. And of course, you know, there's always going to be, across every district, there's always a continued want, a continued need, but we have to watch our costs as we go forward, and it's about making sure we make the right choices, Mr. Speaker. And again, going back to Bill 42 here, what we're talking about is that cost reduction as well, Mr. Speaker. What I'm going to attempt to dominate my 20 minutes here with, Mr. Speaker, is about 4 seats in Labrador. And we know, we've all seen it in the media. We've seen it in this House. We've listened to people across the way. They've listened to us. Everybody's being really intent on listening and sharing their experiences about what they think about cost, or about House reform in general, and the Labrador seats. And we've all seen it in the media. We really have. I believe the member from Cartwright, Lancer Clare, talked about the weight of it. I absolutely acknowledge that. And I think when we talk about jobs, we talk about people being concerned about maybe their district is going to become too large now. I won't be represented. My voice won't be heard. My ideas of what governance is and what we need for our people and our communities, they have that concern that maybe if things change, they won't be heard. All very valid concerns, Mr. Speaker. And I was on Labrador Morning this morning, and I talked about, you know, of course, they're like, Keith, where do you stand? We're amending Bill 42 to achieve what we all want to see in this House and across this province. And that process, of course, is what we're doing right here. And we've heard lots of talk about democracy. And what we're seeing right here is a bill comes to the floor, amendments could be proposed, everybody gets their say, the people are represented, and then we move forward. And eventually we'll come to a point in time when a commission is put together, Mr. Speaker. The chair is selected, members are put together. They look at what the legislation says, and they do what's best for the province. We move forward, and hopefully we get this done, and I guarantee we'll get this done within the time frame that allows us to have our election in 2015 with the 4-year period, what we need. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I'll just say that I committed to listening. I committed to hearing everybody's opinion around all of these different parties here. I committed, as every other MHA in this House did, and we do every time, is listening to your constituents. listening to the community leaders. In my case, it was heavily laden with listening to Aboriginal people and Aboriginal leaders as well, Mr. Speaker. And with that, if we look at across the way to the honourable member from Torngat Mountains, and we realize, yes, with no road access, with heavily populated Aboriginal people in his communities, there's actually a government in place there, of which, Mr. Speaker, I'm a beneficiary as well as the members as well. We recognize that special circumstance. We certainly do. But the justification is out there, and it's been put here by other honourable members, both my colleague from Labrador West, and the colleague from Landsclare, that the other districts in Labrador are indeed unique too. When you look at Labrador as a whole, what do you see? We call it the big land, Mr. Speaker. Geography, the location of Torngat Mountains was used in that decision, as with every other district. As my colleague from Lab West said one time, somebody said, you know what, I sent a document to the Goose Bay office. They knew he was in Lab West. Could you run over during lunch hour and pick that up? Well, I don't advise I don't advise my colleague from Lab West, Mr. Speaker, to do the 7-hour drive in 1 hour. Just not a good idea. But having said that, Mr. Speaker, when you look at Lab West, there are some trying times. We've seen commodity prices go down. We've seen hard times for Wabush Mines. But what does our government do? We step in. $3.8 million worth of grants help them through their time of need. But what we have is a separate community, completely geographically separated, a different culture, Mr. Speaker, different groups of people, hard-working, honest, good people, Mr. Speaker, who have a place in this province because of what Labrador delivers to the economy in terms of the mines that are going to come up, power lines. We see that going through to Churchill Falls as we come into Lake Melville, Mr. Speaker, what I call the melding pot, the Innu, the Inuit, the Nunatuavut people of southern Labrador. We see all of them come together in Lake Melville, right where, of course, Muskrat Falls is. So we go from Lab West and we see IOC, Wabush Mines, then we go to Upper Churchill and Churchill Falls, then we come to Muskrat Falls in my district. And then, Mr. Speaker, we look up towards, I'll say just quickly once again about Torngat Mountains, Mr. Speaker, we look at the potential for uranium, we look at Boise's Bay. There's no doubt. And then again, extending down into Cartwright, Landsclare, Mr. Speaker, opportunities are going to be there. There's a lot of opportunity there. But going back to Bill 42, Mr. Speaker, I just want to say that when you talk about Labrador as a whole, these 4 districts, population of about 28,000 people, over 15,000, and I have to say this as Minister of Labrador and Aboriginal Affairs, over 15,000 people are Aboriginal, Mr. Speaker. So not only do you have a high concentration within the member from Torngat's district, but you also have that, Mr. Speaker, across Labrador as a whole, which makes us completely unique. When you can say that the population of the big land with its massive geography, it's unlimited and untapped, and the resources, Mr. Speaker, the majesty, the beauty of the land, all that put together in one, you've got to admit it's unique, it's special, and it warrants a little bit of talk when you're talking about whether or not we need 4 seats inside of in Labrador. And we talk about within the legislation, Mr. Speaker, the qualifiers, the quotients, if you will. You talk about 10% buffer zone, maybe 20%, 25% in special circumstances. But what I say to you is that the importance of Labrador right now, as evident in our history, Mr. Speaker, what we're seeing is we're taking a real hit because of the price of oil. Right now, we need Labrador more than ever in terms of diversifying our revenue streams as we prepare for the long-term sustainability of the power and the robust economy that we have right now in Newfoundland and Labrador. We need that. And all of the people of Labrador need to know that regardless of population and geographic separation and whether or not they're Aboriginal, whether or not their particular community right now is mature to a point that they have a wonderful mega project or whatever, they need to know that their voices are heard. They are separate. They are distinct. They need to be represented, Mr. Speaker. So you say, where am I going with all of this, Mr. Speaker? It's about the justification for those 4 seats. I've just heard my honourable colleague from Lab West stand up, and what does he do? He talks about, the need for those 4 seats. I believe in that as well, Mr. Speaker. And a lot of people have wondered, Keith, where do you stand? Minister Russell, where do you stand? And you have an obligation. It takes a lot of hard work to be a cabinet minister. I'm learning that. I have to take guidance from fellow ministers, from our premier, from our deputy premier. you have to understand that just because somebody wants to know where you stand personally, you have an obligation to your colleagues. You have an obligation to this government and our civil servants, and you have an obligation to the people to do what's right by the cabinet and its structure. And that's a very hard thing to, I guess, to transition into, Mr. Speaker, when you're used to firing out your opinion as you see fit. We've seen the passion, Mr. Speaker, from our representation from Labrador. We've seen the passion from all districts across this great province. We've seen that, Mr. Speaker, and it's not lost on any one of us on either side of the House. And sometimes it gets heated, Mr. Speaker, and just to talk about that a little bit in reference to this bill, we understand politics, we understand optics, we understand when they get up and put a petition out for my district. And I mean, I follow the petitions, and it's wonderful to even see some Labrador names on these petitions from time to time. And we committed to coming here, and we committed to saying, you know, what do you have to say? What do your people want you to say? We've done that, Mr. Speaker, and it's part of this process with Bill 42 here to say, let's go through the legislature with this bill. Let's look at how a commission would want to structure this House and make sure that everybody has that voice in this House. That's all part of it, Mr. Speaker, and I've done that. I think everybody has. We've had a great debate up to this point, Mr. Speaker. But I do want to make some commentary about some of the debate up to this point. So you call it rebuttal, you call it answering, giving an opinion maybe on what was said in specific reference to the 4 seats in Labrador, Mr. Speaker. And I got to say, I'm not looking to be controversial. I'm not looking to take somebody down personally, but I think we have a responsibility in this House, not only to the people of each of our districts, but a responsibility when it comes to governance, when it comes to opposition, when it comes to fighting for what you believe in, Mr. Speaker. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to just say, and I'll talk about the member for Torngat just for a little bit here, Mr. Speaker. And I just want to say one quick thing about the member for Exploits. There was a little bit of a heated debate where he was talking about roads and how, you know, it's not unique in anyone's district to not have a lot of roads. And it was taken out of context, but an honourable man, as the member for Exploits is, went over and offered that apology. I mean, that's how it works. People see the heat of the moment when you're at home, but sometimes you don't get to see that. We're all people here. We respect each other. We respect each other's opinions, and we're willing to reach out personally when sometimes there's a little misgiving there, Mr. Speaker. In terms of, I will correct the member for Torngat. He did get up in the House, and I'm only reading from Hansard here, saying that both the member for Lab West and I were in support of getting rid of 4 seats. Never at any time did we say that, Mr. Speaker, and never at any time did our leader, the Premier, say that as well. We were prepared to be open to keep options on the table, Mr. Speaker, if you will. In terms of one more comment from the member from Torngat, he did say that you know, that more or less Labrador was being treated like a shed door that was being opened, that we take what we want. Mr. Speaker, when some of the projects that we have that Labrador contributes to our economy and allows us to diversify our revenue streams, you have to consider, you have to be responsible in your messaging. You have to say there were some antiquated royalty arrangements in place and some power regimes that really didn't see us get the lion's share, Mr. Speaker. That's why we have to work together. In unity, Mr. Speaker, we have to be together in all aspects. The Labrador portion and the island portion, Mr. Speaker, together. Together we're strong. Together we'll realize our full potential and begin to have an economy that can't be touched by any volatility in one commodity or the other. We'll be able to balance. And we hope the situation that we're in where we got to make hard calls, show some leadership, and you know, that's a bully from the people. Sometimes you just get less to speak. I get something that they first sent out. We hear some separatist talk, and I'm not going to try and single anyone out. It's not about beating up on an individual. What it's about is my statement I just made. It's about unity. It's about making sure that people are well represented. Bill 42 is going to help us achieve that and make sure the balance is struck. Labrador needs to have its voice as well, but we cannot afford to be irresponsible to the point where we're willing to compromise our unity as a province, the strength and resources of the big land, the oil of the island portion, and the sheer numbers and the professionalism, all the people we have, you know, the wonderful communities and the experience that we have, our education system and the young people coming through the system. We cannot compromise that, Mr. Speaker.
Hear, hear. Hear, hear.
We have to stand together, Mr. Speaker, and that's my point. And if you were to ask me, as a native son of Labrador, why talk of separatism? Why does it bother me so much? And why is that coming up in the topic of Bill 42, Mr. Speaker, where we're trying to justify keeping seats and moving seats and what that magic number is, Mr. Speaker? It's because of my heritage. I've stood in this House many a time, Mr. Speaker, and I've talked about my wife Brenda from the Northern Peninsula. I'm born and raised in Labrador, yes, but we have a fisherman's daughter Rosie and Wyman up in Green Island Brook on the Northern Peninsula. My kids, Mr. Speaker, they know that Dad's a Labradorian, they know that Mom's a Newfoundlander, and they know that her dad was a fisherman, mine was an electrician. We don't come from money. We're average, everyday people who strive and work to make a way in this world, and that's what every Newfoundlander and Labrador, that's the opportunity they should have. We help foster that, but we have to be united. I think about my Aboriginal grandparents, Graham and Gramps, Eliza and Norman Edmonds, came down from northern Labrador to make a way for their family. I think about my Nan and Pop, Frank and Maud Russell, came from the island when my dad was only 2 to go to work at the American base just to make a way for themselves, Mr. Speaker. You've got to take those things into consideration when you do make comments that could even intensify any type of advocacy for separatism, Mr. Speaker. It can't be tolerated. I see my time is winding down, but I just want to talk a little bit more about the absolute unique characteristics of the 4 districts in Labrador, because when I talk about the Innu, you see a beautiful people, a strong people with culture, Mr. Speaker. When you talk about Nunatuavut, when you start moving down to Cartwright, Lanchicleer, I had the pleasure of spending some time with them, facing some real issues, you know, hard, ultimate rural locations where water and sewer is hard, facing relocation, issues that we face all across the province. I've spent years in the legislature up in the Torngat Mountains, Mr. Speaker, fighting for the people of Lake Melville and fighting for what they thought too. I saw how they live. I did everything I could to help improve those circumstances, and that's what we have to do. When it comes to Labrador, Mr. Speaker, are we unique? Yes, in geography. In people, yes, we are. We have a wonderfully diverse culture. Like I said, heavily laden in Aboriginal population, and we welcome all people. It's not just about Aboriginal people either. We welcome all people. Do we have our challenges? Yes. Do we have resources? Absolutely. That should benefit everybody, no matter where you live, in every district in this great province, Mr. Speaker. And when it comes to Bill 42, I just want to make sure that we move forward together. Let's get this done. Put politics aside. If we're going to have an election in 2015, let's do it. Let's get the right number of seats here. Let's be fiscally responsible together, Mr. Speaker. Let's get to a point where we don't have to use politics and put in digs at each other and say, you're not representing your district. We have to have a measure of respect for each other, Mr. Speaker. That's where I want to see us go. We have to get there. And with Bill 42, yes, it's contentious because we are talking about those jobs, cuts, all of those things, Mr. Speaker. But when you look at Labrador as a whole, and I talked about Nunatsiavut, but I talked about Nunatuavut, I talked about Innu Nation, Shehadji, Natchwashish, I talked about the communities in all the districts represented here, Mr. Speaker, in this legislature. And I'd just like to end by saying this, that Labrador, the big land, and its unique landscape and geography, its unique people, Mr. Speaker, from all walks of life, the beauty of the Aboriginal groups, and their cultures, and I'm proud to be a native son of Labrador. Ultimately, it's one of the greatest things that I have in my life, Mr. Speaker. People saw in this House, Mr. Speaker, that we over here on this side of the House, we have true leadership. We have the flexibility to meet with a private member's resolution of the NDP to say, you know what, let's form an all-party committee. Let's change our course of direction in order to best serve the people of the province, Mr. Speaker. So therefore, I'd like to say with my last few seconds that I'd like to announce that in the committee stage to come in the debate for Bill 42, Mr. Speaker, under the leadership of our Premier, I'd just like to say that we will be putting forth an amendment, Mr. Speaker, that will protect and maintain the 4 seats in Labrador. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Order, please. Order, please. The honourable member.